Welcome back from Chavruta. Hope you all got through at least part of the sources and maybe even all of them. I'd like to just take this opportunity to thank everybody for coming to this course, for joining the course. It's really great having you. It's great being able to learn year after year with some of you. And I just wanted to mention a few things, which is number one, Maggie helped create a survey to get feedback from everybody about the course. You know, since we're not live, we are in breakout rooms and we get to speak, but I'd love to get more feedback about the course. It's a quick survey. You just have to fill out. It'll take you a few short minutes, and that'll really help us get feedback about the class. If you enjoyed the class and you want to help, the class is free of charge. If you'd like to give a suggested donation of $50 and $100 or 180 to 360 shekels, it's really optional. You do not need to, but that would be helpful to be able to allow us to run our courses. There's a beginner's course starting next week. So with Rabbanit Leah Sarna, so it would be great if you joined. There's part two of there were two parts. There was one last year. We're going to try to do one every year. You don't need part one to take part two. You don't need any background, so you can join part two. Okay. I want to thank Maggie for helping this course to happen. I want to thank Yeshivat Risha and Rabbanit Chana Dreyfus for her help also in making the course happen. It's a great partnership that she does the Hebrew, I do the English, and we work on the sources together. So it's a great resource working with Yeshivat Risha. I just want to also mention, you might not know about all of the options of learning past this course. So we have this course, we run it every year. But in between, there's lots of other learning opportunities with Hadran. You can start learning the daf if you want, if that sounds too daunting. You can also learn a Masechet at your own pace. You can take any Masechet you want and just start learning daf after daf at whatever pace you want. So there's lots of opportunities of learning. There's other online courses. Like I said, there's past years of courses like this. So if you like this course and you didn't take the previous years, you can go back and take them. And if you want to show your support for us in other ways, you can also support by Facebook, Instagram, and social media, and by spreading the word, because one of the things that we've noticed is that people join really because they hear from other people how much it enriches their lives. So share it around. Okay, hopefully that was all my announcements. Maggie will send out a link to the survey later before the question and answers, and also it'll go up in the WhatsApp group, and it'll be also, for anyone who's not listening live, which is a lot of you, it'll be in the course, besides in the WhatsApp group, also in the lesson and the final lesson. Okay, today we are going to start now with our sources. Pull them up. Okay. So today we're learning about, as I mentioned in the beginning, a bit of a strange topic about the Goel Hadam. And the whole concept of Goel Hadam is very foreign to us. I want to look first at the verses in the Torah, and what we see is something a little bit, I would say, almost confusing, like something that, we've always learned that in Judaism, there's a death penalty, but this is a pasuk that I don't think people really pay much attention to. But in the middle of the section about Ir Miklat, it also, in Bamidbar, it also talks about someone who kills intentionally. And I'm sure you all saw this verse and were somewhat surprised by it, which is that the Goel Hadam in chapter 35, verse 21, the Goel Hadam yamit et harotzeach. When there's a murderer, the relative is the one who's supposed to make sure that they get the death penalty, and they're actually supposed to be the one who's murdering the person who's deserving of the death penalty. Basically, they're supposed to be the Beit Din's messenger to actually go ahead with the death penalty. So that's a very interesting and kind of confusing pasuk, because really, I thought the court does the capital punishment, not the relative. So we're going to put this issue aside for right now. We're going to come back to it at the end. Okay. The next thing we have is when you have an accidental murderer, here are important psukim. If the accidental murderer leaves the Ir Miklat, Yanu Shama, where he ran away, now, it seems like if he were to find him, or maybe you could read it as he is to find him. Okay, it's not so clear. Okay, now this pasuk we're going to see interpreted in two very different ways. And then the Goel Hadam murders the Rotzeach ein lo dam. We're going to get back again at the end of the shiur today to this line, ein lo dam. Ein lo dam means he doesn't have blood running through his body, meaning, kind of in other words, he's a dead man. You leave base, I always think of this big giant game of tag, right? You leave base and you're a dead man, basically. And therefore, the Goel Hadam has the rights to kill you. Now, again, we saw that in Bamidbar, it's very much a mishpati. It's very much the law. There's judgments going on here. There's the comparison seems to be a very almost equal comparison between a rotzach who kills intentionally and one who kills unintentionally. We're going to have to get back to this topic and why this is. And again, we said that in Bamidbar, they seem to be very much focusing on the punishment element. In Dvarim, we get a very different story. And here we have, you run away to the Ir Miklat so that in case the Goel Adam ki yachem levavo, this is one of the phrases that they really focus on. When he gets super angry at you, vihisi go, and he catches up to you, because the path is very far, right? And all that. And basically, the idea is that we have to make sure to protect you always from this Goel Adam. And the focus there is really on the protection. It never says anywhere in the whole section, I didn't bring in the whole section, but it never says anywhere here at all about how he's allowed to kill you and any of that, right? So they're basically, right, the only reason here is if it was sonelo l're'eyu, if it was intentional, then the Skinim send him and they take him out of the Ir Miklat and they give him to this redeeming relative and he dies. Okay, so if you try to fake your way into the Ir Miklat, then you'll be sent to be killed by the redeeming relative. Even the word Goel Hadam is interesting, right? I tried to come up with a good interpretation and called him the redeeming relative. He's translated in many different places in different ways. First of all, Goel often has a very positive connotation, right? We look at this redeeming relative as you're a crazy relative who wants to go after and avenge the death, but really Goel has a very positive, and Goel Hadam really means he's redeeming the blood of his relatives, right? The blood was spilled and we don't allow blood, right? That's something we take very seriously. And we're going to see that maybe by the end of today's shiur, you're going to have a little bit of a different perspective on the Goel Hadam, but it's not just someone who wants to avenge the death of his relative, but in a negative way, but more in a positive way. His blood was spilled and we have to deal with it in some way. So we're going to talk about this and what exactly happens when accidental murderer leaves the Ir Miklat and what changes at that moment that all of a sudden allows the Goel Adam to be able to kill him. And we're going to discuss, is he even allowed to kill him? So, Rotzeach sheyatzah, by the way, I'm always very careful about trying to be gender neutral. And in this case, with murderers and all that, I kind of don't mind that we're keeping it in the male, he. I'm kind of okay with that. So, Rotzeach sheyatzah chutz l'tchum u'mitza'o Goel Hadam. So now we get the Mishnah about this case that we read up in the Psukim. Rabbi Yossi Aglili omer mitzvah biyad Goel Hadam u'reshut biyad kol Adam. Rabbi Akiva omer reshut biyad Goel Adam v'chol Adam chayavin. So we start off with a machloket between Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva. The first thing to note is what is the word mitzvah, and what are words that are used in general in the Mishnah to discuss in the Mishnah and the Gemara in general. There's reshut, which is optional, mitzvah, which I won't define just yet, and then there's chova. Chova is obligatory. Mitzvah is something in between obligatory and permitted. It's very hard to define what this means exactly, mitzvah, right? How many times do we use that, especially to our kids? Oh, it's a mitzvah, you should do it, right? It's a good thing to do. It's recommended, maybe you could say. Actually, when I was writing out the answers, I struggled to find the right word of exactly how I wanted to say it. But it's something in between that we're not exactly clear, but it's not an obligation, but it's also not just that you're permitted, but it's actually something recommended, I would say. So there's a mitzvah biyad the Goel Adam. Everybody else, it's permitted. It's not a mitzvah, but anybody else, if you leave the Ir Miklat, so anyone can really kill you. Rabbi Akiva drops everything down a level and says, no. Everyone else, it's reshut. I'm sorry, the Goel Adam, it's reshut. It's only optional for the Goel Adam. Everybody else, chayavin alav. Now, what is chayavin alav? I know some of you struggled with this in Chavruta. Chayavin alav means you get the death penalty if you kill this person. You are not allowed to kill that person. However, and this is very important. If you open the actual Gemara, you see here that by the words V'chol Adam Chayavin Alav, I'm now in the Gemara, there's an aleph there. This aleph sends you to Hagahot HaGra. Hagahot HaGra, the Gaon Vilna, the Gra, he had also notes. There's Hagahot HaBach, the Bach had notes, and the Hagahot HaGra, because often the text that's printed has mistakes in it. And the Gra says, Mishnah, he says in the Mishnah, V'chol Adam ein chayavin alav. Kaf tzadi lamed. Kaf tzadi lamed means ken tzarich lomar. This is the way it should read. It should read Kol Adam ein chayavin alav, meaning if anyone, the actual opposite of what we just said. If anyone else kills this person, they're not liable. Now, if that's the case, it sounds like it's just like the Reshut Goel Adam. It's permitted. So some people explain that what it means here is the Goel Adam is permitted. Everyone else, it's better not to. But if he does it, nothing's going to happen to him. Okay? Later, we're going to get to this in the Rambam and try to understand we're going to read how the Rambam understands this. But I want to put that aside for right now. Just know that the Rambam's version, by the way, is going to be the Gra's version. Actually, the Gra came after the Rambam by many, many years. But the Rambam is also going to have this version that we see on the page. B'chol Adam ein chayavin alav. Okay, and that's going to be a very key line. So we're going to get to that in a little while. So we now have this basic machloka between Rabbi Yossi HaGlili and Rabbi Akiva. At this point, we assume that there's two basic opinions because that's what the Mishnah gave us. And usually if that's there, the Mishnah, if it's giving us opinions, it's giving us opinions. But now we get to the Gemara, okay? And just, I wanted to point out here about how you can possibly, and I wrote this as a potentially, how does each one understand the purpose of the refuge city? So if you leave the refuge city, the Goel Adam is allowed to kill you. Probably it's because you view the refuge city as punishment. It's like you run out of jail, right? You escape from jail. So you're deserving of death at this point. You don't deserve any protection anymore because you broke the rules. And therefore, the Goel Adam has all rights to kill you. And we prefer that he kill you because you basically broke. It's like breaking, parole or something. Rabbi Akiva could be understood as this is protection. And because this is the way you're being protected, if you leave your protected area, well, anything can happen to you. The Goel Adam is not responsible anymore to hold himself back. He has to restrain himself when you keep to the rules. When you break the rules, he doesn't have to, and Ir Miklad is protection. But I want to also suggest that it's possible that Rabbi Akiva also falls on the punishment side. And as I said, we're going to talk about this a little bit later in Shiur. So the next section of the Gemara is very similar, and this is just interesting to note, that when you have, if you can click, you can see the highlights of the Tanaitic material. I'll do it in English and then I'll do it in the Hebrew so you can check what you did. What the Gemara is going to do is, they quote the words of the Mishnah, and then they start with a Braita. And the Braita has almost the exact same content of the Mishnah, other than one thing. Okay, so the wording is the same. We have Reshut biyad kol adam, divrei Rabbi Yossi, mitzvah biyad goel adam, ein goel adam, Reshut biyad kol adam. He adds these words. If there's no goel adam, then anyone else can do it. Rabbi Akiva says, Reshut biyad goel adam, v'chol adam chayavin alav. Again, the same thing. Here you see the version that we saw in our text also. But what's the difference between the Braita and the Mishnah? The Braita starts off with a pasuk. And that, in the end, the Gemara is going to explain, is the source for both opinions. Now, why is this important? Because this is important to understand the way these books work. The Mishnah is a book that was put together by Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, and his goal was to give you halachot. He didn't want to show you where it comes from in the verse. That wasn't his intent. He wanted very simple, this is the halacha, or these are the opinions, and here you have them. But we have another type of book written at the same time period, which is called the Midrash Halacha. Now, why is it called Midrash Halacha? Because it's the drashot that got to the halacha. And those are often quoted by the Gemara because the Gemara wants to fill in what the Mishnah didn't do. The Mishnah didn't show, this isn't just a halacha, this is a halacha connected to verses in the Torah. And what the Mishnah, or the Midrash Halacha does, is it connects these all. So that's why the Midrash Halacha started out with a pasuk. V'ratzach go'el hadam et harotzeach. Okay, let's go up and look at the verse again inside. So where is this verse? It's very important to know. And if you didn't remember where it was, right? When you look in, I'm going to now open the Gemara. I'm going to show you again. When you look in V'ratzach goel adam et harotzeach, and you didn't know it was a verse, but you were using the actual Gemara, there's a number 6 here in this Gemara. It happens to be a number 6. Sometimes it's Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. Okay, so here the number 6 takes you to the pasuk. It says it's in Bamidbar Lamed Hey Kaf Zayin, and you open up your Tanakh into Bamidbar Lamed Hey Kaf Zayin, and here you have. And the pasuk before it is, because that's always important, not just to read the pasuk itself, but to see it in its context. It says, if the Rotzach leaves the Ir Miklat, okay, right, he leaves the city of refuge, and the blood avenger comes upon him, outright, they call it the blood avenger in this translation, and the blood avenger kills the killer, there is no blood guilt on his account. So here you say, right, what do we learn from this? So now going back to our, sorry. Okay, so now getting back to our question, our Gemara, the Gemara is going to say that they both learn it from these words. And how so? So my Tama de Rabbi Yossi Agli, what's his reason? Miktiv im ratzach. It doesn't say if he kills. It says in the pasuk, v'ratzach, and he kills. How do you read and he kills? He should. It's a good thing for him to do it. If you leave the Ir Miklat, then the Rotzach, the Goel Adam can come and kill you, and he should. It's a mitzvah. He says, by the fact that the pasuk, it's interesting. Usually, drashot what it says. These drashot are going to be what it doesn't say. It doesn't say if he kills. So therefore, v'ratzach, according to Rabbi Yosef Glili, is almost like a commandment. And Rabbi Akiva says, miktiv yirtzach, doesn't say he will. Yirtzach means he should. Doesn't say he should. It says, and he does. So comes Rabbi Akiva, he says, because he does. He murders him. Murders him means he can. Nothing will happen to him if he does, but it's not like I'm recommending that this is something he should do. So it's very interesting to see that both of them take the exact same pasuk, the exact same wording, and each one says, well, it didn't say this, it didn't say that, and they come to very different conclusions. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan, as we said, is an intro, opening to a Braita, Tafresh. Okay, and now, okay, so we did that, and now we're going to move on to our next sugiyot. Now we get to the next section. The next section starts off with a statement of Rav. Rav, you should know, was one of the first Amoraim, the first Amorah, and he often has status where he can actually argue with Tanaim. Okay, so Rav makes this statement. Amar Mar Zutra bar Tuvia Amar Rav. So Mar Zutra bar Tuvia quotes Rav. Rotzech sheyatzach chutz l'tchum. By the way, the tchum I didn't talk about. It's all the Shabbat boundaries. There's 2,000 cubits around the city. So if you leave the Ir Miklat, but you're still within the boundaries, the 2,000 cubits, that's really considered part of the city still. It's only if you leave that border. Rav says something totally against both the opinions that we saw. And he says, the Goel Adam has no rights to kill this person whatsoever. Okay, this kind of sits better, I think, with most of us, right? And who gave rights to this Goel Adam to go murder somebody? Right? He was an accidental murderer. It's not like he did it on purpose. So he says, you get killed if you do this kind of thing. To which the Gemara, now they could have answered, Rav Tanahu Pali, and they could have said, we don't care that Rav disagrees with all of the other opinions. And the first thing the Gemara says is, Kima, according to just Rav said, Lo Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Lo Rabbi Akiva, it doesn't match any of the opinions that we know. So they answer, which, like I said, they could have said Rav Tanu Pali, which means Rav has status because he's the first Amorah. He gets status like the Tanaim, and he can actually disagree with them because there's a basic rule. Okay, I should really have gone over this first, which is Amoraim cannot argue with Tanaim. The only way you can argue with the Tana is because the Amoraim are later and they don't have the status of the Tanaim. You can only do it if you can prove that there's a Tana who holds like you. So Rav Tanu Palik, he's the only one who's allowed status to argue with Tanaim, but they only use it as a last resort. And in our case, they didn't need to use it because why? They found some other source that Rav holds like Huda Amal, Ki Hai Tana. He holds like the following Tana, De Tanya, as we learn in a Braita. And here goes the Braita. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Ad Amdo Lifnei Ha'ida Mishpat. This is a pasuk, right? That says let's open it for a minute. right? So here, you can look over here. This is always a good way to look. If you look at the psukim, v'hayu lachem ha'arim l'miklat, mi go'el adam, it's also in this Bamidbar Lamed Hey, v'lo yamut ha'rotzeach, okay, these are, right, for people to run away, and they shouldn't die ad amdo lifnei ha'idam mishpat. That basically means we have to take you to court to make sure that you're really an accidental murderer. And if not, then you'll be killed in the court. Okay, but no one can kill you until you're judged. Then, like we saw, once you're judged, the redeeming relative, if he, right, he can have the rights to kill you if you're intentional. So comes this drasha of Rabbi Eliezer, which is really talking about intentional murder. And he says the following. What do we learn from this? Ma Talmud lomar, what is this coming to teach you? Lefisha ne'emal, because it says, v'ratzach go'el adam et harotzach. By the way, this is another midrash halakha, because we're getting to the halakha. It's actually a much more elaborate midrash halakha, which is more typical than the other one. The other one didn't connect it all to the pasuk. Just said they both learned it from this pasuk, and the Gemara had to explain to us how they actually derive it from the pasuk. But here they actually tell you. Rabbi Eliezer says, and often in the midrash halakha you have this question: Ma Talmud lomar, what is this coming to teach you? So he says the following. There's two psukim that we have to work out. Lefisha ne'amar v'ratzach go'el adam et harotzach, which is what we saw before. Yachol miyad. You might have thought that ratzach go'el adam et harotzach, and this could be referring to the intentional murderer, that when the go'el adam kills the murderer, maybe he can do it immediately, as soon as the murder takes place. Talmud lomar ad amdo lifnei ha'idam mishpat. Which means what? Now this is talking about an intentional murderer. What this means is, if let's say I murdered someone intentionally, and you're the relative, and you come chasing me and you want to kill me right then and there. You can't, even though you have rights to kill me. You only have rights to kill me after a court has ruled. This makes a lot of sense, right? Because who knows? Maybe it was accidental. What do we know? So I have to stand in court. Once I stand in court and I'm convicted that I'm an intentional murderer, then you have the rights to kill me. What does this have to do with our topic? It's not exactly directly related to our topic. It's indirectly related. Because why? Because this is basically saying the only time the Goel Hadam has rights to kill the Rotzeach is when? If he was judged in a court for murder. And in our case, he wasn't. So Rav is going to basically be holding like Rabbi Eliezer, apparently, who holds that the Goel Hadam does not have any rights to kill the murderer unless he was an intentional murderer, and that's definitely not the case. Just because he left the Yer Miklat doesn't turn him into an intentional murderer. Now, what are we left with? Well, if he darshans this pasuk, so now what does he say? Just Goel Hadam, Ratzach Goel Hadam, Ratzach, you might think you can murder him, if he leaves the Yer Miklat, you might have think you can murder him before when he's on his way, if you think he killed intentionally. No. You can only do it ad amdo lifnei ha'idam mishpat. That's what that second pasuk comes to tell you. So what's left to figure out, and this we always talk about the ping pong. What do Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Akiva do with that pasuk? Ad amdo lifnei ha'idam mishpat. My darshebe. What do they do with that verse? So hahu mebayele lechidatanya. This is a very common use phrase, which is this is needed for the following bright. Okay, he needs it for what's going to be taught in this Braita, meaning, okay, in this case, it happens to be a quote by Rabbi Akiva, so it makes sense that Rabbi Akiva will use this for this, and we can assume Rabbi Yossi must also, which is what? Minayim laSanhedrin. This is a totally unrelated halacha, and we're only here because we want to know what do they do with this phrase, Adam do lifnei ha'idam mishpat. What do we need it for? Well, it comes to teach you. If a Sanhedrin, ra'u echad shaharag et hanefesh, if, let's say, we're the judges, and we witnessed a murder, how do you know that we can't convict him? If, as a court, we witnessed the murder, we can't convict the murderer. Why? Because we watched it happen. We're not going to be partial in any way. Where do we learn that from? Talmud lomar, Adam do lifnei ha'idam mishpat. Here they're focusing on something that we weren't focusing on before, which is they have to stand before the congregation for mishpat. From here we learn they have to be in a different court and not my court, because if I saw it, this is what we call ein eid na'aseh dayan. If I was a witness, I can also be a judge. Okay, that's a total non-related to our topic, so we're going to move off of that right now. That was just what they do with that pasuk, since they don't agree with Rabbi Eliezer. So at this point, we now have three different opinions here. Okay, you can look through the answers for a second if you want to kind of compare. Well, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. So we have basically the Braita was brought in order to show us, right, the third opinion that we didn't have before, and that Rav, who we could have claimed maybe is coming up with his own opinion, actually has someone to rely on. I asked a thought question here, which is why, and it's really just a thought question, I don't have the answer here, but I'm suggesting, why do you think Rabbi Eliezer opinion wasn't brought in the Mishnah? So I had two possible things I thought about. One is he's not actually directly relating to the same topic because he's actually talking about an intentional murderer. It could be also because his opinion was more extreme and not widely accepted. Extreme in a particular way, right? It was more on the fringe and nobody really accepted it. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi didn't think it was important to bring his opinion in. So now we move on to our next section, which is, okay, here's just a chart that kind of helps organize it, just to see. So Rabbi Yossi Aglili thinks it's a mitzvah. Rabbi Akiva thinks it's permitted, he can kill him. And Rabbi Eliezer thinks it's forbidden. Where are the sources? So we had a Mishnah and a Braita for Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva. Remember, one was the Midrash Halacha and one was the Mishnah itself. And then we had a different Braita where we saw Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. And then we had the Psukim where they each learn it from. And then what do they each learn from this Pasuk until he stands before the congregation in judgment? Now we're going to go on to the next sugiyot. And with this, we're going to finish the sugiyot, and then I'm going to add in the extra kind of the Rishonim's perspective on our sugiyot. So we have one Braita here, Tanechada. Av shaharag beno na'asalo goel hadam. So we have one Braita that says the highlighting got a little bit messed up here, so it's not actually accurate anymore. There was some problem and I thought it was fixed, but it didn't work for me. So I'll just be very clear about where the Braitas are. You can see it actually in the English very well, so I'll leave the English up here. One Braita says, okay, this is very common where the Gemara will quote Tanechada v'Tanya. There's one Braita and there's another Braita. And in fact, the two Braitot seem to be saying something very different. So in this case, we have a terrible tragedy. Av shaharag, a father kills his son accidentally. Horrible, tragic event. Something very surprising happens here. Beno na'asalo goel hadam. His son, his other son, assuming he had two sons, becomes the redeeming relative. That's really strange, right? So the son is now going to try to avenge his brother's death by killing his own father, right? With all we know about kibbud av v'aim and all the things, you can't even hit your father. What, kill your father? Sounds very strange. And not only does it sound strange, but there's another Braita that says the exact opposite. Ein benon, right? Tanya idach, there's another Braita. By the way, we had this word idach last week. Idach was the other one, if you remember. And it was a question, what does the other one do with this pasuk? The idach, which just that word was a whole question of itself. Here it's used in a different way, but it means the same thing. Another. So there's another Braita that says, Ein benon asalo goel hadam, which is the end of that Braita, right? How do you know this all? Because we switch immediately to Aramaic. The second Braita says his son does not become the goel hadam. So now they ask the following question, or the suggestion. They want to suggest, let's give this as our answer. What would be the easiest answer to say? Lema, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Rabbi Akiva. Why don't we just say very obviously, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who says it's a mitzvah for the goel hadam. So even if you're the son, it's so important for the goel hadam to be a goel hadam and be there in case the father leaves the Ir Miklat. You have to do what you have to do. There's no choice. And Rabbi Akiva, who says it's only a reshut, you can do it, but we're not telling you go ahead and do it. Well, then of course the son is not going to be able to be goel hadam, and that would be a good explanation. Gemara rejects this immediately and says v'tizbera. Let's talk about this word v'tizbera. The root is saval. Saval, like a svara, is something logical. Savar is what he thinks. So v'tizbera is always used as a question. Do you really think this? No way, no how. Be lemanda amar mitzvah. Okay, lamed mem dalid lemanda amar. The one who says, whether you say it's a mitzvah, which is Rabbi Yossi Aglili, be lemanda amar reshut, whether you say it's optional, like Rabbi Akiva, mishare, no one in the right mind is ever going to permit a son to basically kill their father, even if their father accidentally murdered their son, their brother. How do we know this? Ha'amal, didn't he say, remember I told you Amar always means it's going to be an Amora speaking. Didn't Rabba bar Rav Huna say the following? And not only did Rabbi Bar Huna say this, but Tana de Rabbi Yishmael. In the house of Rabbi Yishmael, they also brought this braita. So we now have a braita from the Tanaitic time and the statement of an Amora, who both say, Lakol ein haben naaseh shaliach la'aviv lahakoto u'lakalato. For any kind of issue, a son can never be a messenger of the court for his father to administer any sort of punishment. If the father's supposed to get lashes, son can't give it. If they're supposed to be cursed for some reason, son can't do it. He can't do anything against the father, even if he works for the court. If you work for the court and your father comes in and he's supposed to get punished for something terrible he did, son cannot administer the punishment. There's only one unique exception to this rule, which is not relevant for our purposes, other than someone who incites other people to worship idols. Because the Torah said, specifically what case? In the Masechet case, lo tachmo v'lo tachaseh alav. There is no mercy for this person. There is no covering up for him. This guy is the worst of the worst. And from there, they learn even the son can administer the punishment. So there's one character who, of course, because persuading, it's bad enough to worship idols, but persuading other people to worship idols and leave God, that's the worst of the worst. There's one exception to the rule where a son can do it. Beyond that, not at all. So basically, we rejected our first option. It can't possibly be, okay, let's look at our chart for a minute. It can't possibly be that the son becomes the redeeming relative as Rabbi Yossi Aglili, because it's a mitzvah, and the son does not become the redeeming relative as Rabbi Akiva, because, who said it's optional? Can't be that, because nobody thinks that a son can be the redeeming relative. To which the Gemara says, so what's our answer? Ela lo kashya. Don't worry, it's not difficult. We have a resolution. Ha bibino, ha bibembino. This is also a very, very common structure. We have a lo kashya, we have a contradiction. Then we say, oh, it's not a contradiction. This is in one case, and that's in another case. That's the ha v'ha. One is talking about a son. So if a father kills his son, all the cases are the father kills the son. The question is who becomes the redeeming relative? Is it the son or is it the grandson? Now, even though a grandson is commanded to respect his grandfather, it's not the same as respect for a father. And therefore, in the case that a father kills a son, the grandson can be a goel hadam. This sounds a little bit crazy, especially for people who have grandchildren. The thought of your grandchild being your redeeming relative would be crazy. But again, here's the contradiction. Here's the rejected resolution. And here's the second resolution, which is grandson can be the redeeming relative, son cannot. So they changed Bino to Ben Bino, which isn't so crazy. And we have, okay. So now, and here I just wanted to show you how it's kind of split into three sections. First, they say, V'tizbara. Did you really think, right? It can't really be that if you say it's a mitzvah and you say it's optional, none of them would permit it. Why? Because we have this other statement that was made by both an Amora and a Tana that a son can't do this. And then we bring a proof in the verse just for this side point about the Masechet case, okay? The one who incites other people to worship idols. So those are the sources I wanted you to get through. Whether you got through them or not, now we got through them together. But this didn't really address our big questions, which is this goel hadam. What exactly is going on here? And particularly this last sugya, which basically makes sure that there's a grandson in place who's going to be the goel hadam for the. Sounds like it's not just my emotional feeling as the relative that I want to avenge the death, but it seems to be that there's this position called the goel hadam, which needs to be filled by somebody. And according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, there's a responsibility that if somebody leaves the Ir Miklat, you've got to be there, and your mitzvah, it's a mitzvah for you. It's not obligated. You're not obligated. We're not going that far, but it is a mitzvah for you to be in charge to bring this person to justice. So the question is, what exactly is going on? It's a very complicated sugya, and I won't promise to answer all the questions, but I will give you a kind of approach and couch it in all the things that we've been seeing over the past few weeks. So the Rambam, he has a section called Hilchot Rotzeach U'Shmirat HaNefesh, which I think is just fascinating, right? Especially when I was translating into English, the halachot of a murderer and preservation of life. It's fascinating. The Rambam calls it this. Probably give a whole shiur just on that he thinks the halachot of a murder are basically, I guess what he's saying is they're meant for preserving life, right? That's what we're trying to do here. Going back to that goel hadam, right? He's redeeming the blood that was spilled for no good reason. So the Rambam says the following. In Perek Hey chapter, we're going to see three different sections where the Rambam talks. רוצח בשפרגה שהרגו גואל אדם חוץ לתחום עיר מקלטו פטור. Okay, so this we know already. He's exempt. If you leave the ir miklat and the goel adam kills you, he's exempt. Notice he says he's exempt. He doesn't say it's a mitzvah. Everybody holds like Rabbi Akiva, by the way. Then it says achad orgo baderech, even before he goes to ir miklat. Okay, we're not getting into this. Nichnas li'ir miklato v'yatza chutz l'tchuma. If he goes into the ir miklat and leaves bizadon. Okay, I won't get into this whole sugya. What if you leave accidentally? Okay, that's a whole different thing. He basically permits people to kill him. That's Rabbi Akiva. You have permission. Here's the key line that I showed you before in the graph. If anyone else kills him, okay, they're not liable. Okay, it's the opposite of what our Gemara said because they had a different version. Same Gemara, just their version was no. But he adds the following: Ein lo dam. Why is that? Because he doesn't have any blood in him. Okay? What does it mean he doesn't have blood? Good question. You killed someone by accident, and now you leave the ir miklat. You no longer have blood. What does this mean? Okay? And why is this? So it's a good question. And what exactly is going on here? So the first thing to talk about is that we have, it could be that, like we said, giant game of tag. You leave because the goel adam can kill you. Everyone else can kill you as well because you're no longer on base. Once you're no longer on base, you have a death warrant on your head kind of thing, right? The goel adam theoretically could kill you. Once he could kill you, you're like a person who doesn't have blood running through your body because you could potentially be killed by someone else because you basically lost your protection. Okay, and then we can look at this solely as ir miklat is protection. You leave your base, you can get killed. Since you can get killed by the goel adam and nothing will happen to him, therefore anyone else can kill you and they won't get punished as well. But I want to view this in a possible other way. So if you look at the Rambam, and this is going to connect with what we learned in the first class, he mentions in Perek Vav halachot daled and hey, yesh horeg b'shgaga. There's some people who kill accidentally, but tiyat shgaga karov lizadon, but it's much closer to intentional murder. And there'll be some sort of pshia, he says, there was some intentional, some wrongdoing. Oshayalo lizahel, he should have been more careful, he wasn't careful. And the law is a no-golet, which we struggled with because, right, what do we say? On the one hand, you're not deserving of the protection ir miklat offers, but what about the punishment? You're not getting punished, right? We kind of left that a little bit open. This person who's karov lemezid ends up not getting a real punishment, which he really is deserving of. So we talked about it. Maybe he doesn't deserve the punishment because the punishment atones for him, right? He can't get killed because we don't have witnesses that he was warned and we don't have all that. So he's kind of in this holding pattern where he kind of deserves a punishment, but he's not getting it. The Rambam says something very interesting about it. He says, "Mipnei she'avono chamu, ein galut mechaperet lo, ve'en arei miklat kotot oto, she'enam kotot ela mechuyav galut b'lvad, and therefore mitzvah goel adam b'chol makom v'arago patur." The one thing you have is that the goel adam can kill you at any point, and that is the key. The Rambam says a fascinating line. Umaya says this. So what do you do if you've killed b'mezid, and now you've killed shogeg karov lemezid? You're close to intentional. You weren't really intentional, but you weren't unintentional. You weren't unintentional. So he says here, what's this person supposed to do? Yeshev v'yishmor atzmo migoel adam. You should sit there for the rest of your life worrying. You're going to basically live your life in fear that someone's going to kill you. And in a sense, that itself is punishment, right? Could you imagine living your entire life thinking that any time someone's going to come and kill you, right? It's a crazy thing. That the Rambam views as punishment. And that's how he views the Rotzach b'shgaga, and who's shogeg karov lemezid. His punishment is that he sits all his life worried. Okay? That's really a big punishment. The Sefer HaChinuch says something very interesting, and I want to connect all this. The Griz actually brings us in and connects it with the Rambam. The Sefer HaChinuch says that one of the roots of this commandment is, and I'm going to read you just a certain part of it. He says he starts off with talking about how terrible killing is, how murder is, and therefore someone who murders someone, even shogeg, because some terrible, horrible mistake happened because of you, basically you have to go to exile. Why? Sheshakul kimat kitzal mita. It's like death. Exile is like death. Why is exile like death? Because he says you separate from all the people you love. You separate from your home where you grew up. You live all your life with strangers. Obviously, they don't become strangers anymore. But he says basically, right, forget about that, the Kohen Gadol's mother gives you all this nice stuff. But really, it's pretty miserable living there. And he says, really, you're supposed to die. But we give you this other option. So the Griz, which is the Brisker Rav, he has this brilliant idea that he says. He says that when it comes to this line of the Rambam, I'll go back from it. So the other thing I wanted to just point out is, and this we saw in the Psukim already, you don't really need to see it in the Rambam, but how it's a mitzvah b'yad el adam if a person murders intentionally, to murder, right? That if someone murders intentionally, el adam, they're really supposed to kill the rotzach. The Rambam, by the way, just to mention it, says their job is to bring him to court. Their job is not actually to murder, but if he tries to get away, their job is to make sure justice is served. Anyway, in this line, Ein Lo Dam, okay, we talked about it before, that perhaps Ein Lo Dam and no one else is liable. Why? Because the Goel Adam can kill him because you left base and he's no longer protected anymore, and maybe that's why. But the Griz wants to say that he's actually, based on the Sefer Achinim, he's deserving of death. But what? You go to Ir Miklat, and that's your punishment in place of death. But if you leave that space and you say, I don't want this punishment, what happens? It's almost just like the city's protecting you from the Goel Adam, it's also protecting you from this death penalty that's kind of hovering over your head. And as long as you're in the Ir Miklat, you don't have that death penalty on your head. But you leave that Ir Miklat, and the Griz wants to read the Rambam as Ein Lo Dam, you have no blood. You're a dead man. You're deserving of death. And that explains all of a sudden why this Goel Adam is allowed to kill you. It's not just because he's angry and we're letting him get his anger out because you left base. No, it's because you're really deserving of death. And if you're not willing to accept the punishment and you leave this city intentionally and you say thanks, but no thanks, you're basically saying, I don't care about murder, the fact that I murdered someone. And that brings upon you the rights of the Goel Adam as he would have if you killed intentionally. He now has the rights to basically kill you. And that's a whole different perspective of understanding this Goel Adam. And that connects between why this is all mentioned next to intentional murder and unintentional murder. Because according to this view, and again, this is an opinion, it's not the only opinion, but it's an opinion that maybe the person who goes to the Ir Miklat is really in some way deserving of death. So I want to just take this and review very briefly the 4 shiurim that we did until now and the link that links them together. So we saw, does the killer go to the refuge city? We even got to see it today, where we talked about if you're, Karav La'ones, maybe you don't need punishment, maybe you don't need protection, right? We talked about both the punishment and the protection element, both there. Also, the more you get closer to Mezid, closer to intentional, you're not allowed to get the protection that it offers, and you're also not allowed to get the atonement that it offers, right? The punishment in itself is a good thing also. Then we talked about going on the way, and in particular in that studio, we saw this emphasis on why there's equal amount of Ir Miklats on both sides. And we said, because there's more murderers, and then we had this whole thing, what do murderers have to do with this, right? Why are we talking about intentional murderers when we've got unintentional murder going on here? And again, there's that link between them. How much are they linked? And is it that, again, are we talking about protection we saw, or are we talking more about punishment? And we saw the Rishonim and Achronim kind of split on those issues. Then we have, when does the killer leave the refuge city, right? Which is the death of the Kohen Gadol. And within that, we also saw either somehow the relatives, his death causes the relatives to realize they're not interested in killing you anymore. And your protection is, you don't have to worry about them trying to kill you, or maybe your atonement is finished, and likely, by the way, it's both of these things, right? It's really the combination of factors, because there's so many multiple things going on here. It's what makes this sugya so fascinating, because there's different things going on at the same time. There's atonement going on and punishment, and there's protection. So in a sense, the Kohen Gadol's death kind of also is the atonement element and also is the protection element. And then we got to today, what if he leaves early? And then again, is it that he's just not provided with protection? He leaves when he's not supposed to leave, and we just don't provide him with protection. Therefore, the Goel Adam can kill him if he wants. So we basically took Rabbi Akiva, where I said in the beginning, you would have thought that Rabbi Akiva is more in the protection element and not punishment, because he just gives an option for the Goel Adam to kill you. But really, in the end, we saw through the Rambam that it could be understood in both ways. Either it's that you just don't have the protection anymore, or it's that since you're avoiding the punishment, they can come and basically make sure that the punishment happens. Just as a last note, why would we care and let the Goel Hadam give this punishment, right? And again, it's something I said before, which is I think that there's a concern in a system of law that people just don't care. Like someone gets out of jail, okay, he escaped from jail, we could try to find him, but who's going to put in the effort, right? There's not enough money, resources, people. But the Goel Hadam, it lives in his blood. Like this is his relative, and he wants to do whatever he can to basically, so it's a way of using and channeling that negative energy into using it for something important, which is to make sure this person actually keeps to his punishment and keeps in the Ir Miklat and the threat. I really love that line of the Rambam. What's he going to do? Yeshev yishmor atzmo Goel Adam. Like you're going to spend your entire life just protecting yourself. And that fear in and of itself is enough to keep you in that Ir Miklat. Just thinking that if I leave, someone's going to be trying to pursue me and trying to kill me for the rest of my life. Which again, goes back to what we started with. Again, I don't think it's fair to say that the Torah is really thinking about a therapeutic, the therapy element of this, but we did talk about it in the beginning. And I think that it's possible that maybe, I don't know, maybe the Torah was thinking about it. I just don't think people thought in those terms in those days. But it is also therapeutic for you, to know that there's someone out there trying to kill you, and it reminds you what you did, but it also gives you a place to create a new life where you don't have to worry about all those things. When you talk about the Rambam and his worry, you can imagine what it must be like. Besides your own guilt, you also have that someone else is going to hate you for the rest of your life. And this gives you a place, like a safe haven, where again, to the one hand, it's terrible, and the Sefer HaChinuch talks about it's like death. But on the other hand, you have how much it supports you, and the Kohen Gadol's mother's making you food and giving you clothes, and you have a new community of people that are giving you the support that you need. So I think you can also see that element in all of these sugiyot. Okay, quick review of methodology, and then we'll end for today. So we started with, again, the psukim and the differentiation between Bamidbar and Dvarim, where each is highlighting a different element, and it really ignores the other one for the most part. Then we had the machloket and the Mishnah. We went to learn about what a midrash halacha is, how it takes it from a pasuk, and it's the same kind of thing, but it brings the pasuk and the Gemara, because it didn't give enough description. The Gemara had to kind of fill in how exactly did they learn it from the pasukim. Then we went to Rav, who went against those two Tanaim, and instead of saying Rav Tana Upali, they actually found another Tana that Rav could hold like, because Tanaim can't really go against Amoraim. Amoraim can't go against Tanaim. So we found another source. We talked about why possibly it wasn't brought in the Mishnah to begin with, or in the Braita either. It was brought in a separate Braita. Then we had to figure out, well, if he uses this verse, what do they use that verse for? That's also a very common structure. And this term, midbayele lechidatanya, it's needed for this drasha as appears in the following Braita. Then we had this two sources, Tani Chada, Tani Ida. One Braita, another Braita, they contradict each other. We bring one explanation, we say B'tizbara, that doesn't make any sense because of something someone else says, both in a Braita and in a Mora says it. And then we basically say, okay, here's another distinction, Ha b'bno, Ha b'ben b'no. And then we try to kind of fill it all in together at the end, using the Rishonim to kind of bring in the pieces that we thought were kind of missing in the sugya that weren't addressing the major issues that we were struggling with. And we kind of were able to fill it in using the Ram mostly and the Sefer HaChinuch. Thank you everyone for the class. Thank you for joining. We'll open up for questions and answers. Just a quick reminder, there's a survey, please fill it out. Please take the time, it'll really help us for future classes to know how this goes and what we could do to improve. And thanks again to Maggie.